Elena Vance stood at the back of the combat simulation chamber and said nothing. She had learned a long time ago that silence was its own kind of armor. Around her, alien cadets filled the room with noise. They boasted about their strength. They compared their kills from past missions. They laughed at jokes she did not understand. The Varathi were the loudest. They stood over 8 feet tall, their bodies covered in hard black shells that could stop a bullet. Their eyes were clusters of red dots that seemed to watch everything at once. Their mandibles clicked when they spoke, making sounds like stones grinding together. The Cathari were next in size. They had 4 arms, each one ending in claws that could tear through metal. Their fur was dark gray, and their faces looked like something between a wolf and a nightmare. They moved in groups, always watching each other's backs. The Solani were the smallest of the aliens, but Elena knew they were perhaps the most dangerous. They looked like lizards that had learned to walk upright. Their scales shifted colors with their moods, but their real weapon was inside their heads. They could read thoughts. They could push emotions into your mind. They could make you see things that were not there. And then there was Elena, one human, 5 feet 6 inches tall, no claws, no armor, no psychic powers, just pale skin, dark hair cut short, and gray eyes that never seemed to blink at the right times. Commander Thrixall entered the room, and everyone went quiet. He was a Varathi, but older than the cadets. Deep scars ran across his shell, proof of battles survived. One of his arm blades was missing, replaced with a metal prosthetic. "Today we run a level 6 simulation," he announced. His voice was like gravel in a machine. "Urban pacification. Enemy forces hold civilian hostages. You will extract the civilians and eliminate the hostiles. You will be scored on speed, efficiency, and collateral damage." The cadets nodded. This was standard training. They had done similar exercises before. A Cathari cadet named Vorak pushed through the crowd toward Elena. He was large even for his species, with a scar across his snout that he wore with obvious pride. His 4 arms reached for her simulation gear. "Let me help you, little human," he said loudly so everyone could hear. "These straps can be difficult for species with only 2 hands." Elena did not respond. She let him adjust straps that did not need adjusting. She kept her eyes forward. "Tell me," Vorak continued, "how does your species fight wars? Do you bore your enemies to death with silence?" He looked around at the other cadets. "Maybe you talk them to sleep." "Oh, wait, you do not talk at all." The room filled with laughter. The Varathi clicked their mandibles in amusement. The Cathari barked their approval. Even the Solani showed their teeth in cold smiles. Elena said nothing. She simply checked her gear, ran her fingertips across the simulation rifle's housing, and walked toward her designated pod. Behind her, she heard Vorak say, 3 months, and I have heard maybe 40 words from her. How did something so weak and quiet get into the advanced combat program? A Solani named Thasri answered, "Humans are a mystery. They have no natural weapons, no armor, no psychic ability. Yet somehow they control 15 star systems. It makes no sense." "Perhaps they are good at hiding," another cadet joked. "They certainly cannot be good at fighting." More laughter. Elena stepped into her pod and closed her eyes as the simulation began to load around her. The world changed. Suddenly, she was standing in a ruined city. Buildings rose around her, broken and burned. The sky was orange with smoke. In the distance, she could hear gunfire and screaming. Her helmet display showed her the mission parameters. 30 hostages held in a building 6 blocks north. Unknown number of enemy combatants. Time limit, 45 minutes. She started moving, but not like the others. Through her display, she could see the positions of her fellow cadets. The Varathi were charging forward in a straight line, trusting their armor to protect them. The Cathari were spreading out in hunting formations, moving fast and loud. The Solani were coordinating telepathically, their icons moving in perfect sync. Elena went a different way. She stayed low. She moved slowly. She watched. 12 minutes into the simulation, she reached a position overlooking a plaza. Below her, she could see enemy combatants patrolling. She raised her rifle, placed her crosshairs on one of them, and prepared to fire. Then she stopped. Something was wrong. The enemy combatants were not moving like simulation programs. Their patterns were too random, too real, and the civilians she could see through a nearby window were not standing in the standard hostage positions. They were huddled together, shaking with genuine fear. Elena fired a stun round at the nearest hostile. The blue shimmer of simulation damage should have appeared around the target. Instead, the figure dropped to the ground. Red spread beneath it. Blood. Real blood. Elena's heart began to pound, but her hands stayed steady. She had trained for this. Not this exact situation, but the feeling. The moment when everything goes wrong. Her comms crackled with Commander Thrixall's voice. He sounded different now. The calm authority was gone, replaced with something that sounded almost like fear. All cadets, emergency protocol, the safety barriers have failed. This is no longer a simulation. Repeat, this is no longer a static. The signal died. Elena looked at her rifle. It was no longer firing simulation rounds. It was firing real plasma bolts. The weapon she was carrying could kill. Through her display, she saw the icons of her fellow cadets scattered across the map. Some of them were not moving. Others were moving too fast, running in random directions. Panic. She heard screaming over the comms. A Varathi voice, deep and loud, suddenly cut short. Then another. Then a Kethari howling in pain. Elena took a slow breath. She looked at the chaos unfolding around her, at the real blood on the ground, at the icons of cadets dying one by one. Then she started to move. Not running, not panicking. Moving with purpose, from cover to cover, her eyes scanning every shadow and every window. The simulation had become real. The training exercise had become a death trap. And somewhere in this nightmare, there were still people alive who needed help. Elena Vance had spent 3 months being laughed at. She had spent 3 months being called weak and quiet and useless. Now she would show them what silence really meant. The screaming would not stop. Elena moved through the ruined city, her rifle raised, her eyes never still. Around her, the world had become a nightmare. The holographic buildings that should have flickered and faded were now solid walls of hard light. The enemy combatants that should have been simple programs were now military-grade combat drones. Real drones with real weapons and real bullets. She found the first body 2 blocks from her starting position. A Varathi cadet named Kethran. His shell, which should have been strong enough to stop most weapons, had been torn open by plasma fire. He was still alive, but barely. Green blood pooled beneath him. Elena dropped to her knees beside him. "Can you move?" His compound eyes focused on her with difficulty. "Human? What is happening?" The simulation became real. "Someone sabotaged it. We need to move." She helped him up. He was heavy, far heavier than her, but she found a way to support his weight against her shoulder. Humans were not strong, but they were stubborn. Through her comms, she could hear the chaos. Cadets screaming for help. Cadets crying out in pain. Cadets dying. A Solani voice cut through the noise, tight with panic. "They are everywhere. The drones are everywhere. We cannot—" The voice ended in a burst of static. Elena kept moving. She had found a pattern in the drone movements. They were not attacking randomly. They were herding, pushing the cadets towards certain areas, cutting off escape routes. Someone was controlling them. Someone wanted this to happen. She rounded a corner and found 2 Kethari cadets pinned behind a burned-out vehicle. One of them was Vorak, the one who had mocked her. The other was a female named Silvera. Drone fire kept them pressed against the ground, unable to move or return fire. Elena did not hesitate. She did not charge in heroically. Instead, she studied the situation. 1 drone on the rooftop to the left, another in a window across the street, a third somewhere behind her, based on the sound of its engines. She set down the wounded Varathi and picked up a piece of reflective metal from the ground. She angled it carefully, creating a false heat signature 10 meters from the Kethari position. The drones shifted their fire toward the decoy. Elena moved. She crossed the street in 3 seconds, sliding into cover beside a collapsed wall. From there, she had a clear angle on the rooftop drone. 1 shot. The drone exploded. The second drone turned toward her new position, but she was already moving again. She had grabbed a piece of debris and thrown it through a nearby window. The sound drew the drone's attention for just a moment. That moment was enough. Another shot, another explosion. The third drone was harder. It had positioned itself behind her, cutting off her retreat. But Elena had expected that. Drones were logical. They followed patterns, and patterns could be predicted. She ran toward the drone, not away from it. The move was so unexpected that the drone hesitated for a fraction of a second, recalculating. In that fraction of a second, Elena dropped to the ground, slid beneath its firing arc, and put 3 rounds into its sensor array from below. The drone crashed to the ground, blind and helpless. Elena finished it with a 4th round. Silence fell. Silvera raised her head slowly, her forearms still shaking. She stared at Elena with something new in her eyes. Not mockery, not dismissal, something closer to fear. "You did not fight it," Silvera said. "You hunted it." Elena reloaded her weapon. "That is what humans do." Vorik pushed himself up from the ground. His earlier arrogance was gone. In its place was confusion and something that might have been shame. "How? You are small. You are slow. How did you do that?" Elena did not answer. She was already moving toward the wounded Varathi she had left behind. "Can you walk?" she asked Kethron. "I can try." "Then try. We need to find more survivors." The 2 Kethari followed her without question. Something had changed. In the space of 5 minutes, the silent human they had mocked had become the one they followed. Over the next hour, Elena gathered more survivors. She found a Selani named Tashri hiding in a collapsed building, her telepathic abilities useless against machines that had no minds to read. She found another Varathi, younger than Kethron, with wounds that would kill him if they did not find medical supplies soon. Each time, Elena did not just rescue them. She studied the drones, learned their patterns, and used those patterns against them. She set traps. She created distractions. She never attacked from the direction the drones expected. The aliens watched her with growing amazement. This was not how they fought. The Varathi believed in meeting enemies head-on, trusting in their armor and strength. The Cathari fought in packs, overwhelming their prey with numbers and speed. The Selani used their minds as weapons, breaking their enemies from within. But Elena fought like nothing they had ever seen. She fought like something that had learned over millions of years that it could not win a fair fight, so she never fought fair. They reached a defensible position, a building with thick walls and only 2 entrances. Elena directed the others to cover the doors while she worked on a scanner she had taken from a fallen drone. "What are you doing?" Tashri asked. "Looking for answers." Elena's fingers moved quickly over the device. This was not an accident. Someone planned this. Someone is controlling the drones. Who would do such a thing? Elena did not answer immediately. The scanner had found something, a signal coming from the center of the simulation zone. Someone was in there, watching everything through the drone's eyes, directing the slaughter like a conductor directing an orchestra. "I found them," Lena said quietly. The survivors looked at her. 5 aliens, all of them larger than her, all of them with natural weapons she did not possess. And yet they waited for her to speak. They waited for her to lead. "The signal is coming from the control nexus," Elena continued. "Whoever did this is there. If we take them down, we can stop the drones." Vorik growled. "Then we attack. All of us. We charge the position and die," Elena interrupted. "The path to the nexus is a kill zone. At least 6 heavy drones covering every approach. A direct attack would get us all killed." "Then what do you suggest, human?" Elena looked at the map on her scanner. She looked at the survivors around her. She thought about the maintenance tunnels she had noticed earlier, the ones too small for drones to patrol. Too small for aliens, but not too small for a human. "I suggest," she said slowly, "that we do something the drones will not expect." And for the first time since the nightmare began, Elena almost smiled. The survivors sat in the darkness and waited for death. Elena moved among them, checking wounds, distributing the ammunition they had collected from fallen cadets. She worked quickly and quietly, her hands steady even though they all knew what was waiting for them outside. Kethran, the wounded Varathi, watched her with his cluster of red eyes. His breathing was shallow, and green blood still seeped from the cracks in his shell, despite the bandages Elena had applied. "Human," he said, his voice weak. "I have a question." Elena did not stop working. "Ask." Your species has no claws, no armor, no venom. You cannot read minds or see in the dark. You are small and soft and slow. He paused to cough, a wet sound that worried Elena. How did your kind become a power in the galaxy? How did you survive long enough to reach the stars? The other survivors looked at Elena. The same question was in all their eyes. For 3 months, they had dismissed humans as a curiosity, a species that had somehow stumbled into space travel despite having no natural advantages. Now they were hiding in a ruined building, while a human was the only reason they were still alive. Elena finished loading a rifle and set it aside. For a long moment, she was silent. The others had learned not to rush her. They had learned that her silences meant she was thinking. We were not the strongest things on our world, she finally said. Not even close. There were animals with teeth longer than my arm. Animals with claws that could open us from throat to belly with one swipe. Animals that hunted in packs, that could run faster than us, that could see better in the dark. She picked up another weapon and began checking its power cell. For millions of years, we were prey. We were the things that got eaten. We survived by being afraid of everything. We survived by watching, by listening, by never assuming we were safe. Dashri, the Silani, shifted her scales nervously. But you are not prey now. No. Elena looked up, and something cold moved behind her gray eyes. We are not, because somewhere along the way, we learned to take the fear that kept us alive and turn it into something else. We learned to think like prey, but act like predators. We learned to plan, to wait, to strike only when we knew we would win. She set down the weapon and stood up. Other species evolved natural weapons. Claws, armor, venom, telepathy. You were born with the tools to fight. We were born with nothing. So we learned to make tools. Sticks became spears. Spears became guns. Guns became starships. Vorak grunted. Tools can be taken away. Natural weapons cannot. True. Elena nodded. But we also learned something else. We learned that the universe does not care about fair fights. There is no honor in losing. There is no glory in dying. There is only survival and extinction. So we never fight fair. We cheat. We trick. We trap. We use everything around us as a weapon. She looked at each of them in turn. Your species fight to prove dominance, to show strength, to establish rank. Mine fights to survive. We do not posture. We do not give warnings. When a human decides to fight, the fight is already over. We have already planned 10 moves ahead. We have already found your weakness. We have already won. The room was silent. Dashri whispered, That is terrifying. Elena almost smiled. It is supposed to be. Silvera leaned forward, her forearms wrapped around herself. Then what is your plan, human? How do we survive this? Elena pulled out her scanner and projected a map of the simulation zone. The control nexus glowed at the center, surrounded by red markers showing drone positions. The path to the nexus is covered by at least 6 heavy drones, she explained. A direct attack would be suicide. But there is another way. She pointed to a series of thin lines running beneath the city. Maintenance tunnels. Too small for drones to patrol. Too small for most species to fit. Too small for us, Catherine agreed. But not too small for you. No, not too small for me. Vorak shook his head. You would go alone? That is madness. Even if you reach the nexus, you will be facing whoever is behind this. They will have weapons, guards, traps. Probably. Elena did not seem bothered by this. But I will also have surprise. They have been watching us through the drones. They have seen your species fight. They have not seen me do anything they would consider threatening. As far as they know, I am just another weak, quiet human. She began checking her own weapons. A rifle, a pistol, a knife with a simple, ugly blade. That is our advantage. They do not fear me. They will not be ready for me. Thasri looked uncertain. What do we do while you are gone? You keep the drones busy. Elena pointed to positions on the map. Catherine will stay here. He is too wounded to move. The rest of you will spread out. Make noise. Draw fire. Make them think we are all trying to escape in different directions. You want us to be bait, Vorak said flatly. Yes. For a moment, anger flashed in his eyes. Then he laughed, a short, harsh sound. 3 months ago, I would have torn your head off for suggesting such a thing. A Cathari does not act as bait for anyone. 3 months ago, we were not fighting for our lives. Vorik was silent. Then he nodded slowly. What do you need from us? Elena began explaining the plan. The Silani would use their telepathy to coordinate silently, staying in constant contact with each other. The Cathari would use their speed and forearms to set overlapping fields of fire, forcing the drones to focus on multiple threats at once. Kethran, even wounded, would use his size to provide covering fire from their current position. It was not a perfect plan. People would probably die, but it was the best chance they had. When she finished, Elena looked at the group one last time. These aliens who had mocked her, who had laughed at her silence, who had called her weak and useless. Any questions? She asked. Silvera raised a hand. One. If you do not come back, if you die in those tunnels, what should we do? Elena considered the question. Keep fighting until you cannot fight anymore. Then run. Then hide. Then find a way to keep fighting again. She walked toward the building's exit, toward the maintenance tunnel entrance she had spotted earlier. At the door, she paused and looked back. That is what humans do, she said. We do not stop. We do not give up. We just keep going until we win or until we are dead. And even then, sometimes we find a way to make our deaths hurt our enemies. Then she was gone, swallowed by the darkness of the tunnels, and the survivors were left to wonder if they would ever see her again. The tunnel was dark and tight and smelled like rust and old oil. Elena crawled forward on her hands and knees, her rifle strapped to her back, her knife between her teeth. The walls pressed against her shoulders on both sides. There was barely enough room to breathe. Any other species would have been stuck by now. The Varathi were too large, the Cathari too broad. Even the Silani, small as they were, would have struggled with their tails. But humans were soft. Humans could squeeze. Humans could adapt. Above her, through the metal ceiling of the tunnel, she could hear the sounds of battle, gunfire, explosions, the screams of drones and the roars of Cathari. Her team was doing their job. They were keeping the enemy busy. She hoped they were still alive. The tunnel opened into a larger space, and Elena pulled herself out into a room filled with machines. Servers hummed around her. Screens glowed with data she did not understand. And in the center of it all, standing with his back to her, was a Silani. He was older than Tasri, his scales a deep purple that had faded with age. He wore the robes of a scholar, not a soldier. But the control panel in front of him showed the positions of every drone in the simulation zone. His fingers danced across the interface, sending commands, directing the slaughter. Elena moved silently across the room. Humans had learned long ago how to walk without making sound. They had learned it when making sound meant getting eaten. The Silani was focused on his screens. He was watching the battle outside, watching the cadets die, watching his plan unfold. He did not notice the shadow moving behind him. Elena was 3 meters away when his head snapped up. Telepathy. He had sensed her mind. His hand shot toward a control panel, toward a button marked with symbols she recognized. Vacuum controls. He was going to vent the entire simulation chamber to space, killing everyone inside. Elena moved faster than she had ever moved in her life. Her knife left her hand. It spun through the air and buried itself in the Silani's palm, pinning his hand to the console before he could reach the button. The Silani screamed. It was a strange sound, half voice and half psychic projection, that hit Elena's mind like a wave of broken glass. She crossed the remaining distance in 2 steps and grabbed him by the throat, slamming him against the console. Her other hand pulled her pistol and pressed it against his head. "Move again, and I will kill you," she said quietly. The Silani's eyes burned with hatred. His scales had turned a deep red, the color of rage. "You cannot stop this, human. The galaxy will see what you really are. Weak, inferior. A mistake of evolution that somehow reached the stars." Elena looked around the room. Cameras were mounted on every wall. Screens showed broadcast signals going out to dozens of systems. This was not just sabotage. This was propaganda. "You are broadcasting this," she realized. "Yes." The Solani's lipless mouth twisted into a smile despite his pain. Millions are watching. They are seeing your precious cadets die. They are seeing that humans do not belong among the civilized species. Elena looked at the cameras. She thought about what they had captured, the chaos outside, the deaths, the panic, and her, moving through the tunnels, fighting the drones, coming here. She had been on camera the entire time. Your name, she said. Vethos. He spat the word like a curse. And I will be remembered as the one who showed the galaxy the truth about humanity. Elena was silent for a moment. Then she did something unexpected. She let go of his throat and stepped back. Vethos looked confused. His good hand twitched toward the control panel, but Elena's pistol stayed pointed at his head. You wanted to show them what humans are, Elena said. She spoke clearly, loud enough for the microphones to pick up. You wanted to prove that we are weak, that we are inferior, that we do not deserve our place in the galaxy. She gestured at the screens showing the battle outside. You threw your best weapons against a handful of cadets, military drones designed to kill, and a single human crawled through your tunnels, walked through your defenses, and put a knife through your hand before you even knew she was there. Vethos's red scales began to fade to a sickly gray. You wanted to show them what humanity is, Elena repeated. Congratulations. You did. She did not kill him. That would have been too quick, too clean. Instead, she reached around him and began entering commands into the console with one hand, keeping her pistol aimed at his head with the other. What are you doing? Vethos demanded. Shutting down the drones. Elena's fingers moved quickly. And sending the deactivation codes to every station in range. Your little show is over. You cannot. I already did. Throughout the simulation zone, drones began falling from the sky. Their weapons went silent. Their engines died. One by one, the machines that had been hunting the cadets collapsed into piles of dead metal. Elena reached for her comm. This is Cadet Vance. The threat has been neutralized. All survivors, report in. Static. Then voices. Silvera, Vorak, Thasri, others. Not everyone. Not nearly enough. But some. We are alive, Silvera's voice came through. Elena, we are alive. Stay where you are. Rescue teams will be coming. Elena looked at Vethos, who had slumped against the console, his face a mask of disbelief. I have the saboteur in custody. She pulled the knife from his hand and used a piece of cable to bind his wrist behind his back. He did not resist. He seemed too stunned to move. Why? He whispered. Why did you not kill me? Elena considered the question. Because humans do not just win fights, she said. We win what comes after. You will be tried. You will be convicted. Everyone who watched your broadcast will see you punished for what you did, and they will remember that a human stopped you. She pushed him toward the door. That is what we do. We plan ahead. We think about tomorrow and the day after, and the year after that. We do not just win the battle, we win the story. Vethos stumbled forward, broken and beaten, as emergency lights began to flash throughout the station. The rescue teams found them 20 minutes later. They found Elena sitting calmly outside the control nexus, her prisoner bound at her feet, her weapons laid out in front of her in neat rows. Commander Thrixall was the first to reach her. He stared at her for a long moment, his compound eyes unreadable. Cadet Vance, he said slowly, what happened here? Elena looked up at him. Her gray eyes blinked once, twice, in that strange rhythm that had always made the aliens uncomfortable. Training exercise, sir, she said. I learned a lot. And she almost smiled. 1 week later, Elena stood at the back of the combat class and said nothing. Some things did not change, but everything else had. The room was quieter now. 36 cadets had entered the simulation that day. 9 had walked out. The empty seats were impossible to ignore. They sat there like graves, reminders of what had happened and who had been lost. Elena did not look at the empty seats. She had already memorized them. She had already learned the names of everyone who had died. She would carry those names with her for the rest of her life. That was another thing humans did. They remembered. The door opened and Commander Thrixall entered. He looked older than he had a week ago. The scars on his shell seemed deeper, and his movements were slower. He had lost cadets before, but never like this. Never because of sabotage. Never while he was helpless to stop it. Before we begin today, he said, his gravel voice heavy, I want to address what happened. The room was silent. Vethos has been transferred to a maximum security facility, Thrixel continued. He will be tried for murder, terrorism, and crimes against the Galactic Accords. The broadcast he created has been classified as evidence, but copies have already spread across the networks. He paused. His compound eyes moved to Elena, then away. The galaxy has seen what happened in that simulation. They have seen cadets die. They have seen cadets fight. And they have seen... Another pause. They have seen a single human dismantle a military operation designed to kill trained warriors. Murmurs passed through the room. Elena felt eyes on her, but did not react. Military analysts across 12 systems are studying the footage, Thrixel said. There is already talk of new training programs, new doctrines. A Varathi war scholar published a paper 3 days ago. It is titled The Ambush Predator Theory of Human Warfare. It has been downloaded over 2 million times. More murmurs. Elena still did not react. After the briefing ended, the cadets filed out. Most of them avoided looking at Elena. It was not hostility. It was something stranger. Something like fear mixed with respect. Silvera approached her. The Cathari had changed since the simulation. She moved differently now, more carefully, always checking her surroundings. She had learned lessons that could not be unlearned. The commander wants to see you, Silvera said. High Command has requested your presence. Elena nodded and followed her out. The High Command chamber was a massive room at the heart of the station. Representatives from all 12 species sat in a semicircle, their seats arranged by diplomatic protocol. Elena walked to the center of the room and stood at attention. A Varathi admiral spoke first. His shell was covered in medals, each one representing a battle won. Cadet Vance, we have reviewed the footage from the incident. We have read the reports from survivors. We have analyzed your tactical decisions. Elena waited. You saved 5 lives that day, the admiral continued. You single-handedly infiltrated a fortified position, disabled a hostile operative, and ended a threat that could have killed every cadet in that simulation. He leaned forward. For these actions, we are prepared to offer you immediate advancement to officer rank, your choice of posting, and a commendation for valor. Elena considered the offer. I accept the advancement. I decline the commendation. Silence fell over the room. You decline? The admiral's mandibles clicked in confusion. Why? I did not do anything special, Elena said. I just did what humans have always done. I survived. The rest was problem solving. The admiral stared at her. You say survived as if it was simple. 36 cadets entered that simulation. You brought 5 of them out personally. 8 would have been better. The room was quiet for a long moment. Your species has a reputation for arrogance, the admiral finally said. Elena met his compound eyes without flinching. We have a reputation for a lot of things, most of them earned. After the meeting, Elena walked back to the combat class building. The hallways were emptier than they used to be. Many cadets had requested transfers after the incident. They did not want to be on the same station where their friends had died. Elena understood, but she was not leaving. She reached the combat class room and paused at the door. Inside, she could hear voices. The new cadets who had transferred in to replace the ones lost. They did not know what had happened here. They only knew the stories. And the stories, Elena knew, were already growing. She pushed open the door and walked inside. The room went silent. Every eye turned to her. The new cadets stared with open curiosity. The survivors looked at her with something deeper. A new Cathari cadet, young and eager, leaned over to Vorak. Is that her? The human? Vorak nodded slowly. She does not look like much, the new cadet said. He laughed, a barking sound. I heard the stories, but she is so small, so quiet. Are you sure she... Vorak cut him off with a sharp gesture. Do not, he said quietly. Just do not. The new cadet looked confused, but he stopped talking. Elena walked to her usual position at the back of the room. She did not acknowledge the stares. She did not explain herself. She simply took her seat and waited for the class to begin. But something was different now. When she looked around the room, she did not see mockery in the eyes of the other cadets. She did not see dismissal. She saw something new. They were watching her the way prey animals watch a predator. They were waiting for her to move. They were waiting to see what she would do. Elena almost smiled. Across the galaxy, in military academies and war rooms and strategic planning centers, a new doctrine was being written. It was called Human Engagement Protocols, and its first chapter was already being taught to officers of every species. The opening paragraph read, "Do not mistake human silence for submission. Do not mistake human kindness for weakness. Do not mistake human patience for passivity. And under no circumstances should you assume that a human has stopped fighting simply because they have stopped moving." Elena did not know about the new doctrine. She did not know that her face was being shown in classrooms across 12 star systems. She did not know that her name was becoming a legend. She only knew that she was still here, still quiet, still watching. The combat class began, and Elena listened as the instructor explained the day's exercise. Around her, aliens who had once laughed at her silence now sat in respectful quiet. They had learned what her silence meant. Not weakness, not fear, not submission, patience, and patience, as humans had proven again and again across millions of years, was the deadliest weapon of all.